Fox was effing with me a little bit over some creative stuff for Sons of Anarchy, and I thought I was safe. And then one morning I got a call that said, "Can you go down to human resources?" And I went down to human resources, and they fired me. And it hurt, dude. I mean, it hurt. I am not gonna lie. It was I equate it to people in street terms. I say, it was like being a drug dealer. I had a million friends because I got invites to all the premiere parties and all the, fun stuff. So everybody wanted to hang out with me because we were going to premiere parties and we were meeting celebrities and we were doing all that. And the minute that stopped, all those people went away. It hurt, man. It hurt. And now I look back on that and I say, that moment maybe was my greatest teacher. It humbled me.
What if the lowest point in your journey revealed the path to your highest purpose? Dave Warren's story, from aspiring rock star to Emmy-winning animation artist and creative director, is anything but ordinary. After chasing music dreams to California in a Monte Carlo packed with guitars, he found himself navigating unexpected detours, from cartooning to animating some of the most iconic shows of the 90s like The Simpsons, Sons of Anarchy, Pinky and the Brain, and the Minions. But behind the career highlights is a deeper story of humility, identity, and rediscovery. After rising through the ranks and eventually facing a hard fall from the corporate world as a creative director, Dave learned that what you do isn't who you are. Now he's reconnecting with his creative roots on his own terms and showing up with radical authenticity. In this episode, we talk about creative resilience, ego checks, mentorship, and why the most meaningful success comes when you're no longer pretending to be someone you're not. Only on Navigating Now. Dave, thank you so much. Everyone, today I'm joined by someone whose work you've definitely seen, even if you didn't know it. Dave Warren is a phenomenal artist and creative force behind legendary shows like The Simpsons and the Sons of Anarchy with Fox, and beloved anime shows like Pinky and the Brain and the Minions. But what you don't see in his credits are his journey along the way. And you and I connected via a Comic-Con friend, a mutual friend, and they connected us, and we brainstormed back and forth about my ideas with Star Wars and Dark Side for Life. And you were just so giving with your time, and you have such an amazing story and have impacted so many lives that I want that story to be shared again. And that's why I asked you to come on. Thank you. It's an honor to have you on as a guest today.
Oh, thank you, man. And thank you for that wonderful, wonderful lead in. Oh, my goodness. You should be my agent.
I'll throw that on my resume next time. Oh, my gosh.
Please.
I love it. I had the pleasure of actually meeting you in person at Lilac City Comic-Con, and we were introduced by Nathan O'Brien. And when you have a booth and you're signing autographs and selling pieces of art, you had the longest line. And you had so many kids in your line, and I had to wait in line. I was like, "Oh man, I could not wait to meet you in person." And you're making such a difference. And I just love that you are so giving with your time, and I just see how you are with the kids and changing their perspective and giving them a little bit of inspiration of becoming an artist. And I just think your journey is amazing. So I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, and let's go through your journey on how you became who you are.
Well, I don't know if I can introduce myself any better than you did. I'm Dave Warren. I'm an animator from, like I said, shows from The Simpsons, Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs. Was a creative director for Sons of Anarchy for the first 5 seasons. Worked on the Minions, launched the Minions movie in China, did a huge pop-up event there, which was an absolute blast. And these days I'm doing the Comic-Con circuit and out there and pounding the flesh, as they used to say, and having a fantastic time. It's been literally a life-changing experience doing these cons, and something that, quite frankly, I didn't anticipate when I started. I was really looking for a vehicle for something to do as I moved into my retirement. And leaning on my skill set. I have mutual friends that, are doing the same thing, and I spoke with them about it and kind of dipped my toes in last year. And then this year went full blown. Excuse me, and it's just been, like I said, it's been a life altering experience for. Uh, the reason is that I meet so many children and adults at these shows where Comic Cons and these fan expos, these type of events are almost like a sanctuary. It's a place where I think that people who are on the spectrum and people with special needs um, find a home. They find a place where they can be free and be themselves. And I didn't anticipate that. I didn't see that as part of my bigger picture with this. It was really, like I said, about getting out there and supplementing my income.
Sure.
But it's turned into much more than that, and it just continues to grow and continues to evolve. And I'm just grateful every day. I just came from, I'm sitting in a hotel right now in Medford at the beautiful Compass Hotel by Margaritaville. If you're in the Medford area, I highly recommend. Um, and we did the Meadowlark Comic Con this weekend at Rogue X, and it was amazing. These experiences keep getting better and better and better. The like I said, the interactions with the children and adults. Every time I do one of these shows, there's somebody that touches my heart that makes me realize there's more to what you and I do, than just talk and create. That there's an actual impact we can have.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say is that you don't realize the impact that you're making through either when you meet someone and you connect with them, whether that's social media or whether that is physical, like at a Comic Con, or through your art. I mean, The Simpsons have changed kids' lives. I have so many friends that have named their kids after characters. I have the Sons of Anarchy has been so instrumental in like my cousin in Las Vegas. And it's all of these things you make impact on people. And most people don't even realize it. But now you can see that impact when they share their stories as a fan and how you've influenced them or shaped their life in some way. And I'm sure I have experience in the same way, but I'm sure that just ignite something within inside of you.
I think that this weekend I had a woman who was retired military and telling me about this group of officers in the military and I forget the word that she was using. It was a military term, but basically they got together once a week and as a group of officers and watched The Simpsons. And she was telling me about how when they were stationed in Iraq, um, The Simpsons was the one thing that like brought them back home
Yeah.
and made them feel comfortable and good. And I mean, I'm getting chills just telling it because you're talking about people whose lives are in danger, putting themselves in harm's way, and they find comfort in this, cartoon that I was blessed enough to be a small part of. And
Yeah.
so it's that's impactful. And I get so many of those stories. I had a woman a week ago. I was at a tattoo convention in Bremerton, Washington, and a woman came up to me and she started to tell me this story about. She said, "Oh, I was forced to watch The Simpsons all for an entire summer. I was forced to watch The Simpsons." And I went, "Oh my, what happened?"
Yeah.
And she said, I had to go to hippie summer circus camp." And I said, "Oh, okay, I've never heard of hippie summer circus camp. What is that?" And she said, "Well, have you heard of Wavy Gravy?" And I said, from the Grateful Dead, like the 60s, the whole, and she said, "Yeah." And she said, "I was one of those kids that grew up like with the Grateful Dead and all that." And she said, "So while they were touring and doing shows during the summer, they put us all in this big circus tent out in the middle of the woods and hired a bunch of kids to watch us. And we were only allowed to watch TV once a day. And they had a VHS tape of The Simpsons. So every night for an hour, they projected The Simpsons on the wall of the circus tent. And
Yeah.
that's what we watched all summer long." And I went, "Okay, I've heard a lot of Simpsons stories. That's one I've never heard." And it really got me to thinking, these people have a better story to tell than I do. So I've
Yeah.
kind of got this idea over the weekend, and I went, I don't have a podcast. You do. You have a vehicle, but I want, these are the people that I go, man, I would love to get them together and have them tell their stories because just this weekend, the woman from the military, I had two or three people that came up to me and said, I learned to speak English watching The Simpsons. These stories just, they never stop.
Well,
And
well,
now what I'm seeing, which
I
go
want to
ahead.
interject you. Living in Japan and living in Mexico, that's absolutely one of the ways that I became fluent in those languages is just watching cartoons because we were a sponge as a kid, and most of the interactions and the nonverbal cues off of cartoons and anime is it's that's how I learned. And so I would be in Japan watching Felix the Cat or different anime, and that's how I learned to interact in Japanese. And so I can completely relate to that. 100%.
Yeah, and so there's when you talk about, the impact and the things that what to somebody who works in the business, you become a little bit jaded, I guess, and you don't realize the significance of what you do. And
Mhm.
that's when you have these opportunities to go to these shows and you realize, you see what's happening. Um, I'm
And
seeing
it's
that a lot.
worldwide.
Go ahead.
It's worldwide. Like your impact and your influence, your reach has been worldwide. And obviously that's not only at home in the States, but it's like if the military is able to see that in when I went to UW at college, the whole dorm would watch The Simpsons, and there is this impact that you make and this relatability and this comfort, right? You're making people feel like they belong, like they're a piece of them.
And I've started to notice something in the last I want to say 6 months or so that a lot of people want to talk to me about Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs. And it was
Mhm.
something that when I first started to go out, I really kind of leaned into The Simpsons because The Simpsons is, I guess, the crown jewel of the things that I've worked on. And I really leaned into that. The audiences have been kind of talking, going like, oh, you worked on Pinky and the Brain, you worked on Animaniacs, and they start to talk to me about that. So I started to add more art that was geared towards those shows into my collection at my booths. And what's interesting is I get a lot of people now that come up to me with the similar story that I hear from The Simpsons, but with Pinky and the Brain or Animaniacs saying, this was my childhood.
Mhm.
And they glow. They light up when they tell these stories. And I've been trying to process it really over the weekend. And I went, my thinking right now is that we're living in a time that's very, very unsettling. And a lot of people feel this nervous anxiousness about the world and the future.
Mhm.
And I think that Pinky and the Brain for a lot of adults, those 90s kids, right? It represents a time in their life that felt good, that felt safe. And so they're craving like that. And I heard so many times this weekend, oh, I remember that after school block, and I would come home from school and it was Power Rangers and then Tiny Toons and Animaniacs and Batman's, and you go, I think that people are falling, not falling, but leaning into things that make them feel comfortable. It's like I go, this is almost like comfort food for their soul,
100%.
these memories.
My producer's in the other room, like, shaking his hand because he was talking about that too, and it's just like it makes you feel comfortable and like you belong to something, and it really does give you that routine or give you that happiness feeling, and it's just reminiscing. And it's the same with even though before that time I had Star Wars, and, I had Never Ending Story, and I had like He-Man, and those characters really spoke to me, and that's comforting to me, and I love sharing that with my kids now. And you and I have brainstormed on that, but it's just amazing the impact that you've made, Dave. But it wasn't always that way. Like, I mean, you were in a band, you came over. Like, let's change gears really quick and get to how you got to Fox and how you got to work with the Simpsons and how you got on Sons of Anarchy.
I know this is it's not a children's show, right? So I can speak freely. I won't. So when someone asks me that question, I usually quote Hunter S. Thompson, and so that's he's somewhat my spirit animal. That I gotta like I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But Hunter S. Thompson once said, "I hate to advocate the use of drugs or alcohol to anyone, but it's always worked for me." And so that's the long and the short of how I got into animation. I came to California in 1983 from Connecticut with a 1980 Monte Carlo filled with guitars and whatever equipment we could get. And me and my buddy drove out to California with dreams of being rock stars. And, those we were going to do our thing, and for a while there was five guys living in a house, and we always joke the drummer Buzz used to live in the closet, literally slept in the closet, and we had what we called musician soup, and that meant going to Taco Bell and McDonald's, and we would raid the condiments, and we'd go back and we'd literally pool our money together, get what change we could find in the couch, buy a loaf of bread, and we'd go get all these condiments, and we'd sit there toasting bread, and we'd make this soup with the ketchup packets and water. And five guys, in a house, and that was living, and little by little, all those guys left. Like they all gave up and went back to California, or went back to Connecticut, and I stayed in California. And I just, I had always done art. I had always drawn, but uh, I never really, at that stage, I was 23 years old, or 21 when I moved to California, and I didn't really think of myself as an animation artist. That wasn't something that was in the picture. I wanted to be, we used to hang out with the guys from Twisted Sister, and they came to California when they got first signed with Atlantic Records. And so we kind of coattailed off of them and followed them out here. And so, we wanted to be the next Twisted Sister. I mean, that was our thing.
You just weren't
like I said, little by little, through attrition, people give up. They get tired of eating musician soup, and they're like, I'm going back home. I got a bed at home and all that. And I didn't. I stayed. I fell in love with California, and I still love California. And I just went, I'm going to make this work. So I sold cars. I sold whatever I could, whatever job I can get. And I ended up working in art, but I was doing like screen print designs for a lot of the surf and skate companies down in Orange County. So I was doing a lot of work for like Maui and Sons, and oh, who was big back then, I forget, Hurley, those guys. And back then it was called Action Sports. So there was like the big Action Sports show down in San Diego. So I was doing a lot of surf and skate stuff.
Mhm.
And I started working for this big screen printer guy, and down in Orange County, and he had a lot of corporate accounts. And so I was drawing these cartoons. The Gulf War had broken out, and I drew this cartoon of two Iraqi soldiers. And there was this commercial back in the day that was like, I said I wanted a Bud Light, and it was a Budweiser commercial. And so I drew these two Iraqi soldiers on a camel with a six-pack of beer, and Saddam Hussein standing there, and he said, I said I wanted a Scud Light instead of a Spud Light. And so for all you old timers, you remember Scud missiles. And so I drew this cartoon, and copied it and gave it around the office at the screen printing shop. And the salesperson came up to me and said, Larry loves your cartoon. He wants to buy it. And I went, wow, okay, cool. Who's Larry? And she said, Larry Flint. And I said, Larry Flint, like Hustler magazine? And she said, yeah. And I said, make the connection for me. So it turned out that Modern Bride was one of the magazines that Larry Flint owned. So I didn't know this at the time, but Larry Flint owned like 300 magazines, not just Hustler. But he bought the cartoon for Hustler, and they paid me $300. And I was back in that time, man, that was a lot of money. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can get paid $300 for drawing a cartoon. And so I went, I think I can want to do this.
Sure.
And so I was playing in a band, and I was started drawing cartoons for adult magazines. And so I started doing that, and that was kind of my foray into being an artist and getting paid to do art. And it was a good run. I had a couple of girls at the time, and then I had this sort of come to Jesus moment where I went, I'm playing in a band. I draw cartoons for adult magazines, and I've got 2 daughters. And there feels like I might be at a pivot point in my life where it's time to grow up. And I don't want my kids going to school, for what does your parent do day, and it's like, oh God, right? Um, so I tried to find a way to segue out of it, and I started making cartoons that were more mainstream, and I decided, okay, I'm going to be the world's youngest syndicated cartoonist. That was my goal. And I never got there, but I did end up getting a couple of spots with this United Features thing that was called The New Breed, where they would take up and coming artists and they would put like a single panel cartoon in the newspaper under this thing called The New Breed. And I got in there a couple of times, and I was thrilled. I still have the copies. I mean, I'm on the same page with, Gary Larson, who was my idol at the time,
Mhm.
and all that. And that was great. And that was kind of the beginning of, you know, okay, let's, this is cool. And but I kept in the apparel business. So I went from screen printer to screen printer, and then I ended up being an art director for a clothing company in Compton. And I hired this guy that was because I had a background working in adult magazines. This guy applies for a job as an artist at this company where we're doing Disney and Warner Brothers. And his name was Gavin, and he was from South Africa, and he was a character. And he shows up for the job interview, and he opens up his portfolio, and it is literally like spreads of pornography. And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, you know what we do here, right? We make Bugs Bunny and, Rescue Rangers. Like, we don't do this. And he was
Yeah.
like, oh, mate, I'm from South Africa. I've got this, I published this magazine called Giant Jugs. And, and I used to work in animation. I hated it. It's the worst job I ever had. And so I'm a publisher. I publish my own magazine, but I don't make any money. I need to make some money. And he was such a freaking character. I hired the guy. I hired him. I was like, oh, I'm that way. I like people that are interesting.
Yeah.
So that's why you and I are friends.
Uh-huh.
And I hired Gavin. And Gavin comes to work, and all he does is bitch about animation. What a horrible job it is. They work you to the bone. They're, and all I heard was, man, that's a really good job.
Oh, wow.
And at 32 years old with 2 kids, I went to school at the union. The animation union used to teach classes at night. And so I went for my job during the daytime, drove to North Hollywood, took classes for a year, which was in retrospect a blessing because I couldn't afford to go to Cal Arts. I was a young dad. I didn't have the resources to be able to do that. And the union was affordable. And I also got to learn from the masters. These were guys that were retired legends in animation that were teaching classes. So I feel very blessed that I had the opportunity to work with those guys. And so I got my portfolio together, and I'm back at my clothing company in Compton, and I get a call one day, and they say, hi, this is Sherry from HBO, and we're calling about Ben. And Ben was a guy that used to work with me. And I said, oh, Ben's, great artist, a fantastic guy. And I said, if you don't mind me asking, Sherry, what's Ben going to do at HBO? And she said, well, we're starting up an animation division and we're thinking about hiring Ben as an artist. And I went, oh, well, I don't want to take Ben's job, but I just finished getting my portfolio together. I've been taking, animation classes for a year. So she said, well, come on in and bring your portfolio. So Ben and I both got hired. And so from Ben
You
applying for HBO, go
you
ahead.
seized the moment. Like the opportunity was there. You had the skill set and the portfolio with you, and you totally went with it. And you took a chance, and you said, "Well, I love that you didn't put Ben down, but you both got hired. Like you just saw an opportunity and you seized it. You took that chance."
Well, I think that one, getting ahead by stepping on someone else's back is never a good plan, right?
Yeah.
So it was Ben's job to have, and I was lucky enough to be able to kind of, you know, uh, hitch my wagon to his star, so to speak. Uh, but there's, I don't operate by that philosophy. So, like I said, it's I believe in helping others, and if you help others, you're helping yourself. So that that's a pretty simple philosophy for me. Um, but yeah, so that was it. We started Ralph Bakshi had a show called Spicy City, and Ben and I both started on Spicy City together, and that was the beginning of my animation career. And that was I'm from the 1900s. It was 1997, I think, if I'm correct.
Okay, so the Simpsons had already been running at Fox or at HBO with the Tracy Ullman show. So like,
No, the Simpsons was at Fox, and that was now the Simpsons had already been running for a while.
okay, all right.
So Simpsons started in 1989. So I didn't come on to the Simpsons until season 19. I came in the middle of the show. Um, so yeah, so that was it. We started it at HBO together, and it was a fantastic group. Eric Radomski was directing Batman. John Kafka was directing Spicy City. Catherine Winder was the producer. And this was this little boutique studio with, I think, maybe a staff of 35 to 50 total. And where Catherine, the producer, would walk around barefoot in her sundresses, and everybody had input on the show, the dialogue, the storyboards, all of it. And it was a beautiful experience. It was a great way to get started in animation because everyone was included. It was, to this day, I'm still friends. I talk almost daily with some of those people from all those years ago. It was a really beautiful, beautiful experience. And
Well, you were put into an absolute creative melting pot. Like everybody was like a family, I'm assuming, and that you learned from each other and you raised each other up and you created something that continued to give so much to so many people. And that was that opportunity right there at HBO.
yeah, and later on in my career, like at Pinky and the when I went to Pinky and the Brain, that was my next gig from Spicy City. I remember John Kafka saying to me when I was going over to Warner Brothers, he said, "Well, you're in animation now," and I was thinking to myself, "Well, I've been in animation. What does that mean?" And when I got to Warner Brothers, I realized what he meant. It was, like I said, I was with a crew of maybe 30 people on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over to Warner Brothers, and it was floors of animators and seas of cubicles. You know, when you see those like cartoons, and that's how it was. No computers. We were still drawing on paper back then. No cell phones. So when you got a call, there was a payphone, not payphone, phone on the wall at the end of the hallway. And they would announce on the PA, Dave Warren, you have a phone call. You have a phone call. And so everybody would know when you got a phone call. It was like prison. You'd go up to the wall and go, um, and but
I'm sure you got that a couple times.
exactly. And but it was intimidating. You know what I mean? It was like I went from this environment where I felt very nurtured, and then all of a sudden I went into this thing where there was hundreds and hundreds of animators. I mean, on our floor we had Batman on one side, and we had Pinky and the Brain on the other side. And that was just one floor. There's another floor that had Sylvester and Tweety's Adventures, whatever that was called. And so like, it was just crazy, right?
Sure.
But at this sea of cubicles and just the like artists that were not that the artists at HBO were amazing, but you got to know them real quick. You know what I mean? It was a small group, and you became familiar and comfortable. When I got to Warner Brothers, it's like freaking Bruce Timm is down the hall. You know what I mean? And it's like, and everybody talks about this man like a legend, and you're like, you're afraid to walk by his office because you're like, oh, that's Bruce Timm, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and so it was real intimidating. My first meeting, they threw a script at me, and I was the character designer. So they threw a script at me, and my first episode was a Calvin Klein parody. And they gave me a script, and I had to design like 30 runway models. But it's Pinky and the Brain. So it's like this model is wearing a shaving can outfit. This one's dressed as an Easter ham. So they're not in bikinis or typical pageantry clothes. It's these bizarre ruminations of the minds of the writers. So I go back to my cubicle and I'm like, oh shit. Like, one, I've never been tasked with doing these many characters. And two, I don't even know where to begin here. And, you're like I said, now I'm on this Steven Spielberg show. And you're like, oh, I was like, my career's over. I'm dead. I'm dead.
Sure.
And
What inspired you to keep going, or like, what was it that told yourself like, I can do this? Or was it the guys next to you, the girls next to you? Like, what helped you
it was,
through that?
yeah, it was the people. It's always the people. At Warner Brothers, there was a group there that helped me, nurtured me, looked out for me, helped me grow. I was blessed to have Norm McCabe, one of the original old timers down the hall. And I would go sit in his office and talk to him. The directors, you could go sit there with the directors, Rusty Mills, Liz Holman, God bless their souls. I can remember sitting with Liz Holzman, and she was like, "Yeah, you're a good artist, Dave. You're a good artist, but you don't finish off your characters. You don't you." And I didn't understand. I was like, "Help me," And she went, "You draw your hands and your feet too small. Your arms and your legs, they come out to points, and they need to be more pronounced. They need to be more theatrical." And so little things like that, that helped me. And going forward to The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
I remember David Silverman, who I idolized, and when we did the movie, I had the opportunity to work really close with him, and he taught me so much about acting for animation, about how Homer does, with his fingers, and how they were modeled. That the acting was modeled after Laurel and Hardy. So if you watch the old Laurel and Hardys and the way that they behave, and you see Homer, you'll see similar mannerisms, right? That was David Silverman. He was a fan of Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and those old, visual comedies.
Sure.
And so had I not had the opportunity to meet that man and have him share his wisdom with me, that would have never happened. Had I never had the opportunity to work with Liz Holzman and her tell me, every time I draw a hand, I think of Liz Holzman telling me, make sure your hand is well pronounced. Make sure that, and I think a lot of artists fall into traps like that because I didn't feel comfortable drawing hands and feet.
Sure.
They're difficult. And so I would draw them small and try to hide them because you always put them behind and do these things. So you're cheating to try and get your drawings passed and not have to do the stuff that you're uncomfortable drawing, right?
But so connected yourself with people that you looked up to, aspired to be like, and you were curious enough to learn from them, and they obviously impacted you. These little lines that you still take today when you draw something from something somebody said 30 years ago. That's the epitome of a mentor-mentee relationship.
And it works both ways. There's a yin and a yang and a pendulum to both ways. And this is so one of the things when we talk about things that impact people and, stay with you for life. I think, the thoughts we think and the words we speak shape our world. And, words are very powerful. And early on in my career, I was airbrushing uh, towels. Not airbrushing on towels, but I was doing designs for a company that created beach towels, and they were licensing from Disney and Nintendo. And we would get paid $50 to airbrush a board with
Mhm.
the design of these Disney characters. And this is with airbrushes. We're not using pens or paints, we're airbrushing.
Sure.
And I would go home every day blowing paint out of my nose. You could wear all the masks you want, you're still huffing paint all day. And this woman would get paid $50 for one board, so you had to be fast, and then it's got to go to Disney for approval. It was a nightmare, but I was getting paid to do art, and I was around cool people. But that woman said to me one day, she called me in her office and she's like, "What the f is wrong with you?" And she was all over me, and I was like, "Man, what did I do to this person?" She
Mhm.
goes, "You're colorblind. I don't understand. You don't understand color. What? These are the worst color choices I ever saw in my life." And she just berated me about my color choices. To this day, I hear that woman in the back of my head every time I go to color something, and I have to kind of mentally dismiss her and say, her opinion doesn't matter. But when I say that pendulum swings both ways, you can inspire people or you can tear them down with your words. So it's now at this stage of my life, I'm very, very cautious because I'm in that stage now where the kids are coming to me. And so to bring it full circle to, our conversation, I'm very, very mindful of the words that I speak when I've got somebody in front of me that's looking at me
Mhm.
for whatever reason as a source of inspiration. And I go, if there's anything I can do, I want to pass along something to that person or that child that's going to motivate them to become more of who they are and happy in it. So that's it.
Oh, I think that goes for a leader, a great leader, a great mentor, even a parent. I mean, you have 2 kids and I have 2 kids, and it it we have the power to help shape and influence lives, and things that my dad told me when I was a kid still stick with me that aren't positive, right? And sometimes the negative can actually teach us more of how to be positive. And we talked about that, about the dark side for life, is that a villainous character can actually teach you how not to treat people, how not to act, how not to live your life. So you can find positivity even through negativity, but it's how you decide to perceive it. And if you know in advance that you have the ability to change somebody's life or impact or influence someone, we should be careful of what we say because they remember, especially kids. The things that I remember as a kid, I love that because I look at my daughter now and she's 10. I'm like, she will remember everything that goes on.
Yes, she will.
And so it's important to be a good role model. And why not share that positivity and that optimism with not only my kids but the people that I speak to from stage, or the friendships that I make, like with you? And it's like, why not give ourselves more? And you do that every single day. And you became a you finally eventually moved on to being a creative director, where you got out of that big uh uh let's call it like a cattle call area with lots and lots of people, and you learned things, but all of a sudden you became even higher up and you were able to share that with other people. Did you find that with your teams that you worked with and the people that you began managing?
Well, one of the things like when I think back on my time as a creative director at Fox, I I guess the my source of pride is that there are a lot of artists that I worked with that I still work with that would say, "I'll work with you, Dave. Anything you've got, any project you have, I'll work with you." Um, uh, because I came from the trenches,
Mhm.
and I know what it's like to be on both sides of the fence, and so I treat people with respect. And when I work with people, I value their time, I value their creative, input and their talent, and I make sure that they're aware of that. I make sure that everybody realizes that they're appreciated, and I work really hard to try and inspire people, not through my words, but through my actions.
Mhm.
Walk your talk. Um, I honestly, there was no clear career path for me. There's still no clear career path. Um, I'm getting more comfortable as I age with accepting the fact that everything happens for a reason. That
Mhm.
I don't believe in coincidences. I think that there's a higher power, whatever you want to call it, in back of everything. And so I believe that I'm being divinely guided, and I believe that it's at this point in my life, I just kind of have to relax and let it flow. And Dave needs to get out of the way and let whatever it is, just flow through me, right?
But you
And
and that is, I think, as our at our age and our experience and like the knowledge and skills that we have, we are able to like give back and look at it differently, through a different perspective. But you weren't always the person that flowed. It was, you also were a thorn sometimes too. And I kind of want to change gears and go into with the Sons of Anarchy and pitching that whole idea, because that was one of, not your personal hardest no's, but that was a hard no that you were getting back from corporate, that you didn't really fit in. And I would love for you to kind of tell that story.
well, shout out to Kurt Sutter, because in all my years, I'll start this story by saying the Fox was effing with me a little bit, um, over some creative stuff for Sons of Anarchy. And people who are fans know that Kurt Sutter was the creator of that show. And they were messing with me with this. I designed a Harley for Sons of Anarchy, and it was a big deal. It was the most expensive piece of merchandise that Fox had ever had available as a licensed product. So it was a pretty high profile product and a high profile project. And I was working very closely with Kurt. Obviously, it's a Harley. We want it to be authentic and legitimate to the show. And I was getting pushback from some corporate people, and telling me what I could do, what I couldn't do, and the things that they felt were right and wrong with it. And so I reached out to Kurt, and I was, like said, hey man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this and that, because Fox, is giving me a hard time about it. And he wrote an FU letter to the head of the studio and basically said, if you fuck with Dave Warren, you're fucking with me. And I mean, I literally went, holy shit, this guy's the creator of Sons of Anarchy. Like, he had my back like a gangster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that guy was like, wow, he's a fiery individual, but he's also loyal. Like, you know what I mean? And that impressed me. But the story that you're alluding to, when Sons of Anarchy first started, we would have these weekly meetings at Fox, and it's sort of like, I forget, I think it was a Tuesday morning 9 a.m. meeting, and this big giant boardroom, and everybody would get in there and they would talk about, okay, this is what we're working on, this is what it's coming out this week, this is blah 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 blah. And so I'm not much of a meeting person. I would sit there and doodle, and I was,
In
you
corporate
know
meetings, right? You would doodle. All right.
And and I literally, like, I've got some funny Fox stories, but the we were definitely the misfits, and it's hard to do that on a studio lot, to be the like the kids that people point their fingers at, but we're kind of them. And so I'd sit in this board meeting, and every week I would bring up Sons of Anarchy, and I'd go, hey, this guy Kurt Sutter, the Shield. You ever hear of the Shield? He's got this show now called Sons of Anarchy. It's a motorcycle show, and on FX, and FX was just starting up. So people who don't know this was at the time when FX was just launching, and they didn't have a lot of shows, right? So FX was like a new division of Fox. They had their own little building on the plaza, and so I started working with FX and wanted to really promote this Sons of Anarchy show, and they just didn't care, and they didn't get it. And they kept saying it's like motorcycle show. And I said, no, you don't understand. It's more than this. It's Shakespeare, and it's going to appeal to a large audience, and it's not just a motorcycle show. So to wind this up, I did this in about 10 meetings. I kept bringing up Sons of Anarchy, and this guy that was the head of our department at the time just got so tired of me bringing it up that he said, look, man, I'll give you a $15,000 budget. Go do whatever you want to do for merchandise with this, and don't bring up your little motorcycle show ever again. I was like, okay, thanks. Cool. Peace out, bro. And I went back and we put together a style guide. And I mean, we went so far as that I had somebody handcraft a leather cover, bound this style guide in leather we had a patch made sewed onto it, bound it together with metal and screws. It looked industrial. It was cool. Anyways, I put my heart and soul into this style guide with guys like Ty Dow and Christian. I forget, I didn't do it all by myself. There was a lot of people that helped me. But we put together this kick-ass program, and I think in our first year with that $15,000 budget, I think we generated $7.5 million in revenue. And then by season 5, so the way that we would rank things in consumer products was by how much money they made. And The Simpsons was the pinnacle. It was Simpsons sells merchandise worldwide, so it's really hard to compete with that brand. It's a legacy. Family Guy was number 2, right on its heels. Sons of Anarchy was off, was Pluto, was way out there. By season 5, we surpassed The Simpsons for merchandise with Fox. And so that was when the bike incident started to take place. And at that time, that man that was running the department he and I kind of butted heads. I think it was 2 alpha males. I don't know if that's the case because I don't consider myself an alpha male, but we rubbed each other the wrong way.
You're a Sigma, I think is what the youth call it now, is a Sigma.
Yeah. And so we were cordial to one another, but it was, it was obvious he, I don't know, he had his agenda, and honestly, I felt like I was untouchable, and that was my mistake. My ego got the best of me because I was like, look it, man, I'm the creative director on The Simpsons. I'm creative director on Sons of Anarchy. I'm creative director on Wilfred, American Horror Story. I was like, I had, all these top shows that I was, running the creative on. And I was like, I'm untouchable, dude. I'm gold. Everything I do for Fox makes money, And so I was like, F this guy. He's an executive that just keeps falling up. I'm the guy that actually makes stuff. Ego, right? And so we get this bike made, and Fox isn't doing anything to promote it. They're being idiots about it. And so Maxim Magazine is having this party for San Diego Comic-Con, and it's at the Andes Hotel, and they ask if we can bring the bike down to the Andes, and they want to put it in the lobby for all the guests when they're coming in the Maxim Magazine party. Let's do it. Kurt approves. So we get the bike, take it down to San Diego. I drive down to San Diego by myself to, support the brand and all of that. Fox had done nothing. So I took some pictures of the bike in the hotel lobby, posted them on Facebook, and said, hey, we're here with this, special SOA bike, exclusive sneak preview here at the Maxim Magazine party. Come on down to the Andes and check it out. I post that thing, and about an hour later, I got a call from Fox that said, you need to take that post down and you need to come back to LA right now. And so took the post down, went back and got called into a room full of attorneys. And I sat there and I said, am I getting fired? And they said, we don't know. They literally looked at me and said, we don't know. That's what you're here for. So I sat in this room and we talked, and I explained to them, I said, look, I didn't do anything to hurt anybody. I'm promoting Fox. I'm promoting this show. And they said, well, it's a violation of your contract. You're not allowed to do that. And I said, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. And they were like, okay, all right. well, but you're not going to Sturgis. The next trip was Sturgis with the bike. You're not allowed to travel with the bike anymore. You're not allowed to. So they kind of throttled me down, and threatened to take the show away from me. And I was like, you don't have to do that. Send somebody else to Sturgis. They're like, okay, you're cool, David. And 3 weeks later, they blew me out. And I thought I was safe. And then one morning, I got a call that said, can you go down to human resources? And I went down to human resources and they fired me. And while I was sitting in human
Oh,
resources, they wiped my computer. So everything that I had created in the 7 years that I was there, I was a dummy, didn't back everything up. They got erased. So all the shit that I created when I was at Fox, I have to go online and see if I can find them. Like I go searching sometimes. Oh, where's this design? I try to find them online because I don't
yeah.
have copies of any of it. But they literally had security escort me on. It's the Hollywood, kiss off. Had
Hmm.
security escort me off the lot. It's like doing that, the walk of death, right?
A
And
box.
yeah, and it hurt, dude. I mean, it hurt. I am not gonna lie. It was I equate it to people in street terms. I say, it was like being a drug dealer. I had a million friends because I got invites to all the premiere parties and all the, fun stuff. So everybody wanted to hang out with me because we were going to premiere parties and we were meeting celebrities and we were doing all that. And the minute that stopped, all those people went away.
Oh,
And I, it hurt, man. It hurt. And uh, it, it was like having my soul ripped out of me. And then it took me years. It took me years to realize that one, I was the cause of it. My ego and all of that drove me to that point. And two, I was identifying myself with what I did, not who I was. I lost my identity. And it
yeah.
took me a long, long time to come to terms with that. Now I look back on that and I say that moment maybe was my greatest teacher. It humbled me. I lost everything, and it humbled me. I lost my home. I mean, it was a rough, rough, rough period. And but like I said, now I look back and I go, it was my greatest teacher. It taught me to be humble. It taught me what was important. Taught me that people are relationships are important and something to be maintained.
Hmm.
And the world doesn't revolve around me. And that was a hard, pill to swallow at that time. Um, Now, out of that, again, I always say I have, Maria Roma, wherever you are, Maria, we see each other on social media. I love you. There's people that supported me through that time that still support me, that I'm still friends with. Um, there's always good people, you
Hmm.
know. So I try not to be the dick in the room now. No?
Yeah. Well, but it was a learning lesson, and like it's the greatest life lesson that you got, and it could have been a blessing in disguise because, like we have discussed, like sometimes those hardest no's are what make us that much stronger and make us more impactful, and maybe it opened up so many new doors for you that you didn't realize that you could get so much joy by making a difference in kids' lives or within the con space. I mean, you and I had discussed this that speaking from the stage at a con, we get to talk to a group of people that don't always feel included. And they aren't always, they don't feel like they belong. And for us to be able to give them something that they can connect with or relate to or maybe reach or be attainable, we just open that up to so many different, that it's okay to be you. And you don't have to hide in the shadows. You can be you more than one day a year at a Comic Con. And you do that every single day, either through your art or through your posts or through the connections that you've made and the people that you help, because you've helped me and you've helped me be a better speaker. You helped me create I'm not that creative person. And it's like, you are so willing and giving with your time that you are making a difference every single day. And I love what you do now. And I think that that might help give you that peace of mind that, yes, it was a hard lesson and it was a hard no, but you're not the only person to have ever gone through that and to lose everything. But now you're open to making so many more doors open to so many other people and making that difference.
I haven't had health challenges. I haven't had the, I haven't experienced real suffering. I've experienced mental suffering and emotional suffering, which is real suffering, but I don't put it on the same level as someone who's lost a child to cancer or something like that. So I consider myself to be very blessed, and I have no regrets. I have been ruminating for the last week now about Ozzy's passing, and
Mhm.
Ozzy and Black Sabbath had such an impact on my life that I'm writing a little piece right now that I'm going to post for the 5 people that look at it. But my roots go back to 5th grade. We had show and tell at Terrell Elementary School in Wolcott, Connecticut, and I brought a 45 of Black Sabbath Iron Man, 1979, and played it in class for show and tell on the little 45 player. And that was 5th grade. And it started my journey with, Black Sabbath to me was something that I loved scary movies as a kid. I liked
Mhm.
Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Blob. I loved all those 50s
Mhm.
sci-fi creature feature kind of things. And Black Sabbath was like, it was like taking Boris Karloff and putting it into music. And I was like, hey, Zeke,
Yeah.
there's my dog. Um, and so it
He,
was a good fit.
yeah.
Yes, Zeke decided he wanted to get in the shot here. Um,
Ozzy
the
interviewed Ozzy got interviewed, and people talked about him coming in and with Black Sabbath and how he was the group was scary and people were intimidated and it was like freaky. And he goes, people thought that we were scary, but we didn't think so. But everybody told us that we should go see this movie, The Exorcist. And so the whole band went and saw The Exorcist. And he goes, and that night we all stayed in the same hotel room and we were scared to death. And people thought that we were scary. So if there's a little tidbit for you.
well, so you've been in my thoughts with Ozzy, because when Ozzy passed, it I was amazed. It gets like we're talking about Pinky and the Brain and how people felt like they find this comfort in that time in their lives. I think Ozzy, for so many people of this generation, um, represented a time in our lives, and his passing, I think, marked for a lot of us in an emotional way, the end of an era for us. It was like something died with us when he passed,
Mhm.
and but it hit me. I'm an emotional person, and it hit me. And I've thought a lot about Ozzy, his life. I've been blessed. I met the man a couple of times in my life. Um, Ozzy was Ozzy. Gene Simmons just said something, and what they're all asking all these, rock stars their thoughts on Ozzy. And he said, there was nobody before Ozzy like Ozzy. He wasn't influenced by anyone else. Ozzy was Ozzy. He was unabashedly himself, unique. And I think that's part of the reason that people adored him, is he wasn't afraid to be himself.
Mhm.
I think also people adored him because if you know Ozzy, he opened every show with coming out and saying, I love you all. He started every show by saying, I love you all. And I was thinking about Ozzy a lot and thinking, here's the Prince of Darkness. This is where you come in. Here's the
Okay.
Prince of Darkness, and you might be the second coming. I'm teasing. The but here's
Damien,
the
here we go.
the quote unquote Prince of Darkness, and the whole world is mourning him. My FYP switched from Jeffrey Epstein to Ozzy Osbourne. And I couldn't be happier. I was like, oh my goodness, I can go on TikTok and it isn't Epstein. It's Ozzy. It's Ozzy. It's Ozzy. And it was like, It felt good. And I went, isn't this amazing that this man that was once considered such a horrible human being is being shown so much love for the impact he had on people's lives for generations, for decades. He's being loved, not for the guy that bit the head off of the bat, but for the guy that entertained and inspired so many people. And he was himself. And it made me start to think about you, and it made me start to think about myself, because the audience doesn't know this, but you and I had a conversation about doing the thing together. And I said to you, you know, Blue, I don't know. I'm kind of trying to lean away from my dark side stuff, because I can go dark real easy, but I'm trying to be good.
Uh-huh.
And then Ozzy passed, and I went, you know what? My roots were doing, where did I feel the best? Doing my motorcycle show, Sons of Anarchy. Man, I became that guy. I was like in the gang. And it wasn't, but I was. You know what I mean? It was like everybody that was on that show kind of became part of it, right? But that was authentically me. Like, I was that guy. I wanted to be a rock star. I liked wearing those clothes. I liked wearing the cowboy boots with the shit all over them. And that was kind of who I was. I liked scary movies. I liked, you know, Black Sabbath. And I distanced myself from my authenticity, because I went, well, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be, it's easy to be, you know, I used to say, oh, it's easy to be greasy. It's easy to be greasy. Well, it's not easy to be Ozzy Osbourne. And like I said, look at his impact.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have, you know, I don't have 50 years in front of me to be able to do that. I have a short window of time. So I'm trying to figure this out. I'm going to start embracing who I am more authentically and stop pretending to be somebody I'm not, because I've been doing that for years, been trying to be somebody that I think other people want me to be, instead of being the person that I am. And so now I think it's starting to reflect in my art. I've just done a whole revamp of my booth, of the art that I'm doing, and I did a lot more designs that represent me. Instead of trying to go, oh, I think this is what the fans will like, I think this is what my audience will like, I went, I'm just going to do what I like. And those pieces are selling. They're selling. And it's not because my art is fantastic or amazing, but I think that there's an authenticity coming from me now, and I'm learning to embrace it. I'm learning to go like, you know what? I would rather go out as Ozzy Osbourne than go out as the guy that pretended to be somebody who he really wasn't. And you know, and that was where with Fox, when I got blown out at Fox, my ego was running the, you know, driving the bus. But I used to think the ego was your devil. You know, I used to think, oh, your ego. And now I think, well, maybe your ego is there kind of as a protection mechanism. You know, it's looking to save you. So it's like, oh, don't jump out that window, you know? So I think it does serve a purpose. I heard Steven Tyler say something recently where he said, the woman said, well, you wrote in this book that, you know, you have to be a narcissist to be a rock star, you know, to be a lead singer. And she said, do you still feel that way? And he said, absolutely. He said, you have to have a healthy dose of believing in yourself to the point that you think, he goes, if you get up on stage and you don't think that you're the guy that's going to rock that crowd of 50,000 people, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. So it gets back to that thoughts are things, right? So I go, stop pretending and start being. And I think that, so like I said, with whatever time I'm left with on this planet, my goal is to go, let's have fun, let's inspire, and let's do it in a way that feels right. And if what's right for me may not be right for you, but it doesn't mean that we're not still heading down the same path. We're just different branches of the same tree. You know, we all grow differently, right? If a tree had just all the same branches, it'd be boring.
Yeah. Well,
And
you have to leverage your gifts. You have to leverage your differences, because it's our differences that make us so special. And you have to be able to see that, and you can't be jealous of the people over there. But then at the same, you can't conform just because that is the easy thing. It's like, I love being standing out. It's okay to stand out because that's what makes you memorable. And that's what makes you also valuable. And I know that you're doing that every day with your art and with the tables that you have. I've seen it firsthand, the impact that you make. And I love that you come around the corner of the table and you greet a child. It reminded me of Mr. Rogers. Honestly, how Mr. Rogers would get down on the level of the child and actually interact. And then also interact with the parents. But it's the parents are here and the child is here, and you're able to interact with both because you're able to move up and down. And you're phenomenal at that, David. And I need to give you a kudos for that. I really do. What because I know that
Can
you
I
are,
tell
man.
you? Let me just tell you a quick story on that before I forget.
Uh-huh.
That little girl at my booth yesterday, and she was hysterical. Her name was Andromeda. And so Andromeda's at my booth, and I'm kind of playing with her about her name, and her sister's name was Rainbow. They all had great names. And so Andromeda, I come around the front of the booth, and Andromeda goes, come here. So I leaned down and I went, what, Andromeda? And she goes, I just and
How old was she?
I went, you called me in for that? She went, so I go, those are the moments I go, oh man, that kid just cracked me up, you know.
Yeah.
But look at it's really the kids, the kids, the kids, the kids. I love the adults, but man, you know, these little ones, they're just a joy.
So much, and as a parent, I see the joy, but then I also see like my kids interact with the other kids, and when I can make them all smile and bring them happiness, it makes your day, and you're doing that every single day. Dave, I am honored that you jumped on today. Where can people find out more about where you are going? Where is this authentic Dave going, and where can people find out more about you and your work that you're working on now?
Well, I'll be working cons through the end of the year. So I'll be at Rose City in Portland in September, and then I go into sort of the Halloween cons. So I start doing Halloween Expo, Horror Con, both in Washington, um, uh, Grit City in Tacoma. So I've got shows going through the end of the year in the Pacific Northwest. My website is elarto.co. And on there, you can find my socials if you want to get Simpsonized. If you want to join my Patreon, which I just recently launched, it's called Dave and Zeke's Incredible Cartoon Crew. And so we're just documenting the dog and I's adventures on the road and trying to create a community there to help keep me in coffee and pup cups.
Mhm.
And so you can go to my website and find that. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok for the time being, and I'm going to start to in the next few weeks launch my YouTube channel, and I'm going to start to migrate more towards YouTube, where I can start to do more drawing things and some more. Like I said, I want to kind of find a platform where I can start to have more of a forum with fans and people like yourself. And I don't necessarily want to do a podcast. I just want to kind of have a canvas, a digital canvas that I can create on. And it seems like YouTube is the place now.
Well, and that's your creative background as a giant canvas. If you could have one single canvas, what would you put on that? And it sounds to me like now you're pouring all this new energy into your new authentic you and making a difference with the kids and finding your own personal path now because you've already crossed so many different paths. And I love that, Dave. I would also mention that if you have the opportunity to meet Dave, that if you can go to one of these cons or if you can connect with him, he's so giving with his time. And I just love what you're doing, Dave. And I look forward to everything that you continue to do. I'm wishing you the best of luck. And I do want to work with you in the future. I think sharing the stage with you and talking about Dark Side for Life and how the villains are way cooler than the good guys, we can do that. But I look forward to building this relationship, Dave. And I just hope that you keep making a difference in this world because I know you are.
The same. Thank you, Blue. I think you're an amazing, amazing soul. And I'm grateful to Nathan for introducing us. And I would love to do a panel together with you or do a presentation together. And we have about a year now, so maybe we can work something out for Lilac for next year. I think that's going to be a big show. I
And it
don't
keeps
want to
getting
say
better. Nathan O'Brien is awesome, and I will let him know, and we will make that happen for sure.
he is Nathan O'Brien. Shout out to love that man. I will work any show that he puts on. He is the one of the finest promoters that I've ever worked with, and he's a good guy. So if you get a chance to go to Lilac in Spokane, do it. He also puts on the Halloween Expo, which is another fantastic, fantastic show. And I can't say right now, but I'll give you guys a little bit. You can connect the dots. I helped work on a Funko Pop for a star that's in a movie that's in the theaters right now. And that particular star has roots to the Spokane area. We had a conversation yesterday, and it looks like we're going to be together at Lilac next year. And we've got some big things planned for that. So I'm excited about Lilac. And Nathan doesn't even know this. Matter of fact, when I get off this podcast with you, I'm going to let him know. So good things coming, Blue. And I hope that you and I get a chance to do something at that show as well, man. I would love it.
I absolutely. Nathan O'Brien is my spirit animal. So there you go for a shout out to him. And everyone, for the audience, I am not that celebrity that he did a Funko, so don't connect the dots to me. But I love it. Dave, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. And I'm wishing you the best luck, and I will see you sooner than later, mister. Thank you.
Thank you, Blue. Absolute pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Navigating No. If this episode brings you value or you know someone who could benefit from it, the best way to support the show is by sharing and subscribing. It's completely free and helps us reach more people. And if you have any questions, feedback, or guests you'd like me to interview, drop a comment while you're there. I'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in. And let's continue sharing optimism and positivity.